I am so delighted and honored to have with us today on Unchained TV's Voice America broadcast, the one and only Leah Garcés, CEO and president of Mercy for Animals, doing so much. Do I look a little tired? I was researching till 1 a.m. We could do an hour on each of their projects, but I want to start with the Farm Bill. It is coming up for renewal, and it will determine to a large degree whether animal agriculture will continue to sort of run reckless and roughshod over our lands, over our animals, over our air, over our water, or if we will start seeing some fairness in the food system. So Leah, thank you so much for joining us. Please tell us, what are you doing and what is Mercy for Animals doing to address this Farm Bill coming up?
Thanks, Jane, for having me. I'm thrilled to be with you again. You are such a rock star in the work that you do and how you get the word out. So I just want to share my gratitude and appreciation to you first.
Thank you. So sweet.
So Farm Bill. This year, as you've mentioned, is the year of the Farm Bill. This is done once every 5 years, and it's really the legislation around agriculture, food, and farming. So a lot of our subsidies are determined in this particular bill. And there's my daughter. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I've got a dog over here, not to compare your daughter and my dog,
it's okay.
My dog's running around and doing all sorts of tricks.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
It's the day off for school, but that's now normal.
I love it. I love it.
Anyway, Farm Bill, once every 5 years. So the idea is we have been collaborating with Senator Cory Booker, who is fantastic, on a marker bill. And this marker bill is called the Industrial Agriculture Accountability Act, which you've put up here. And the idea is we want to hold the animal ag industry accountable for the damage that factory farming does. And there's a lot of different ways we can do that. But there's some pieces in there that are really, really important to us. So for one, we would do things like, and this is not just about animals, by the way. So factory farming negatively impacts communities of color, vulnerable communities, along with animals, along with the environment, along with our health. And so the bill is trying to hold companies accountable to that on different levels. So for example, right now, the industry specifically in our law specifically excludes all poultry from the Humane Slaughter of Methods Act. And we would try to include poultry going forward. We'd also do things like prohibit that horrible system called ventilation shutdown, which is where literally, as it sounds, they turn off the ventilator inside of a factory farm and the animals literally cook to death from not being able to breathe. We prohibit that. We'd also make industry pay for that. Right now, our tax dollars pay for that. They pay for that when there's a loss at the farm because of disasters, because of disease. We pay for that instead of the industry. These big corporate monopolies should be the ones paying for it. And there's other pieces in there like prohibiting the use of incarcerated workers and applying some labor standards for workers and for farmers. And where currently there aren't very many. So that's just a broad summary of some of the things we're trying to address in the Farm Bill. This is the year to do it. We were in Washington, D.C. the week before last on the Hill, in and out of senators' offices and members of Congress, asking them to support this. We're also asking them to adjust, moving our subsidies away from feed, the feed that goes to factory farmed animals, and toward food. Right now, about 30% of all of our subsidies just go to corn and soy that feed farm animals in horrific conditions. And only 4%, Jane, of our subsidies go to fruits and vegetables, and 2% go to nuts and seeds. It's an astronomical miscalculation of where the government should be supporting our nutrition.
Well, I want to show something that I think is very interesting. I never ask people to do something that I don't do myself. So I went on your site, and it literally took me 30 seconds or less to write a letter, an automatic letter to my two senators, Alex Padilla and Dianne Feinstein, and my representative, Ted Lieu. And this will allow me to tell them to, hey, we want the Industrial Agriculture Accountability Act. Now, let me ask you a question. what exactly would the Industrial Agriculture Accountability Act do? And I know we've got some callers waiting. So after you answer that question, we'll go to our callers.
Great.
Leah.
Yeah, so it's, as I said, there's a number of pieces within it, but it would do things like ban ventilation, shut down. It would prohibit the use of incarcerated workers. It would include poultry in the Humane Slaughter Methods Act. It's a very comprehensive marker bill within the Farm Bill that is really beginning to hold the industry accountable. Right now, they externalize a lot of the harm outside, and we're asking them to internalize those costs so that they are more accountable to the damage that they do.
All right, we've got a caller from Texas, Nilofar from Dallas, Texas. Your question or thought for Leah Garcés, CEO and President of Mercy for Animals.
Hi, thank you so much for trying to hold the very corrupt government accountable. My question is the Mercy for Animals' lofty goal to help farmers transition out of the brutal chicken CAFOs and into veganic farming aligned with the Agricultural Fairness Alliance, which strategically employs lobbyists for the policy changes as the Agricultural Fairness Alliance pioneered this concept and launch? Thanks so much.
Great question. So we are, and maybe we're going to talk about this, Jane, but we are really asking the government to support transition. So exactly what you're talking about. And we have a program called TransFARMation, and we're looking to get more farmers to be able to access government funds, to be able to transition to plant-based farming. So away from industrial animal agriculture and toward things like hemp and mushrooms and microgreens and anything else besides using animals in the system. And so right now there are not funds available to farmers for that kind of transition. And in fact, Cory Booker put forward the Farm Systems Reform Act, which had a big pocket of money that farmers would be able to use to transition. So one of the big barriers for factory farmers to transition is they owe too much money. They're under the thumb of these big corporate entities and the debt that keeps them locked into factory farming. They need help from the government to transition. They want to transition. And we are definitely in there. I was in there a week before last talking to government officials exactly about that.
And we're going to talk a lot about the Farm TransFARMation Project. It is the TransFARMation Project, and I love that because obviously it's a play on words. And it's amazing. You've got several success stories of transitioning farmers from poultry to hemp. I love this idea. I want to learn more about it. Let's go to more callers, though. Wow. We've got Sarah in Atlanta. Your question or thought for Leah Garcés, CEO and President of Mercy for Animals.
Hi, thank you for taking my call. I want to ask you a question about your organization. And because everybody keeps talking about children are our future and education is key. And I want to know, do you have any type of education program for schools all across the United States? Because I really believe that it's getting to the children and letting them know because they're going to be the consumers. Thank you.
Well, hello from Atlanta. I'm also in Atlanta, so I hope to see you out there at one of the amazing vegan restaurants one day. So we don't have a children's program specifically right now, and it's a great point. But this coming year, we're actually developing, we're trying to develop something around that. We're going to be developing, it's kind of hot off the press, a new animation and a book, a children's book, and there'll be a kind of club that children can join. And we're working on that project. It'll probably be out in 2024. It's based on a hen that I rescued from a factory farm named Henrietta. And my daughter, who you just saw walk in on this, he and Henrietta were best friends. And it's a story about their friendship, Henrietta's rescue, her friendship, and kind of the freedom that Henrietta enjoyed while she was part of our family. And based on that, we're going to start something called the Henrietta Hatch Club. And so I hope that that's going to develop. I couldn't agree with you more. There really isn't a lot going on for children in sort of the animal welfare world, animal rights world. There's not a huge lot of programming. And I think it's just a sign that, we're an under-resourced movement, and we just are spread really thin. But I do agree that it should be more of a priority going forward, and I hope we get to do that next year.
I think that's a brilliant idea. I remember when I was a kid, as a budding animal lover, I was a member of the Ranger Ricks Club.
There you go.
I had all sorts of little things, and I would binoculars and all sorts of things, and it really did encourage my love of animals, and I felt like I was a part of it. I think that's a brilliant idea. All right, let's go to the next caller. We've got Michael in Los Angeles. Your question or thought for Leah Garcés, CEO and President of Mercy for Animals. So delighted to have her on here today.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning, Leah. Good morning, Jane. I'm a big supporter of Mercy for Animals. Thank you for all you do. But my question is, what is the latest news on Prop 12? And do you think the Supreme Court is going to rule in favor of the pork companies or overturn the proposition, or do you think they'll uphold it? Thank you.
Well, first of all, Michael, thank you for your support of Mercy for Animals. We couldn't be here without you, so thank you. It's a good question. Really, we're expecting that ruling any day. For those of you who don't know, Prop 12 is a California law that banned all cages and crates and the sale of those products. But then the pork industry decided to challenge that and say that it was unconstitutional to ban the sale of products that are made in another state using a dormant commerce clause. And it was brought all the way to the Supreme Court. And in October, the Supreme Court had oral hearings to discuss what the ruling would be. And then they're supposed to make a ruling really before probably the summer. We are expecting that any day now, that ruling. And if anyone listened to the oral hearings, it was fascinating. And these transcripts are 157 pages long. It was supposed to be about an hour. It went on for over 2. It's very clear that the justices are split. They're unsure. This is new territory, which is interesting. And there's never been a discussion at the Supreme Court on farmed animals and whether our trade is constitutional or not of them and how they're treated. So in and of itself, it was so historical that this even was a discussion being had. And my best sense of what's going to happen is it may be returned to the lower courts, and it may not be decided upon, but further delayed in the discussions and returned back to the lower courts. But we'll see. I don't know. That's our best guess, and time will tell. We're waiting for a decision.
I have to say that I am very disappointed that the Biden administration sided against Prop 12 with the pork producers. Baffles me. They purport to want to combat climate change, and animal agriculture is such a big contributor to that. It's truly baffling. Anyway, let's go to the next caller, Joshi in Dallas, Texas. Joshi, your question or thought?
Hi, Jane. Hi, Leah. So I wanted to know, my question is, how do you plan to, first of all, getting the farmers on board with the ethics involved in animal agriculture, and convince them to transition to crop farming or plant-based farming, given that the government heavily incentivizes and subsidizes animal agriculture, and the same might not be true for crop farming, right? So yeah, thank you.
Yes, great question. And I think to be able to answer that question, it's important to understand what the farmer's experience actually is. And they don't really enjoy those subsidies. Most farmers are under huge amounts of debt. So the way factory farming works, and chicken and pig farming in particular, is that, let's say a young person decides they want to stay on the land in rural North Carolina, but the only way to stay on that land is to engage in the poultry industry. So the poultry industry comes to town and they said, look, you can stay on this land. All you have to do is take out a massive loan. You have to take $500,000 to $1 million loan. And to build all of the warehouses and the property needed and the materials needed to have chickens. Then we'll drop off the chickens every month or so, and then we'll pick them back up and take them to slaughter. And at first that goes well for the farmer. He does that, she does that. But it's like a big mortgage. It's supposed to be paid off in 10 years. But what happens is the chickens start to get sick, they start to die, you don't get paid for the dead chickens, and the farmer starts to fall behind on that loan. And they become more and more and more in debt. And the only way to pay off that debt is to keep raising chickens. And right now, and by the time they've realized this, it's too late. They're so in debt, they're so in over their head, and they're beholden to these big companies. And the only way out is to keep raising the animals. But when we've talked to them, biggest surprise in my life is talking to these farmers and realizing how many of them want out. If they had a choice, they would get out. And we're trying to build a bridge for them, a way out, where they can transition away from this essentially indentured servitude towards crops, towards plants, using that same structure. Now, poultry farmers in the United States collectively owe $5.2 billion. Wow. That is such a huge sum that there's no way to overcome that without government support. And that is what we are lobbying for with the members of Congress. We're asking for them to consider transition money, resources, and support for these farmers. So that's part of our Farm Bill ask within the Industrial Agriculture Accountability Act. It's part of our request. It's transition money. So please do sign that petition, that request. It actually makes a difference. We walked into members of Congress and we had them say to us, oh, we're hearing a lot about this. We know about this. It makes a difference. If you are writing to your members, they are going to listen more to our request.
And as I said, I did it this morning. It took me literally 30 seconds, and I'll just show you. Literally click Mercy for Animals, and then it says contact your members of Congress. And I was able to contact Dianne Feinstein, Alice Padilla, and Representative Ted Lieu, my congressman, within 10 seconds. I mean, it's nothing could be easier. If you do one thing today, do that. Go to mercyforanimals.org and automatically send a letter to your 2 U.S. senators and your member of Congress, because they're dealing with the Farm Bill now. We're going to dive deep into TransFARMation, but we just got some more callers. We're going to take 2 more, and then we will dive into TransFARMation, because that's one of the things we really want to talk about. So, Susan, your question or thought for Leah Garcés, CEO and president of Mercy for Animals.
Hi. First, thank you so much for everything you do. I really respect a lot of your initiatives. I did have a question on the Industrial Agriculture Accountability Act. Will that include, in light of DXC's undercover video of the pig being slaughtered with CO2, is that at all included in your bill? Thank you so much.
Do you mean the right to rescue, or sorry if I can?
Yes.
The right to rescue is not included in the bill, unfortunately, but I do think it's such an important conversation that's being had, and I really commend DXC for what they're doing. It's really important narrative that's happening in conversation that's happening at the national level. It could not be more important. So I'm really grateful to Raven, who is the undercover investigator who did this work, and to DXC for forging this important conversation.
Yeah, there's Raven Deerbrook with one of the clips. This woman literally went into the Farmer John slaughterhouse and put hidden cameras and transmitters in the gas chamber area, recording for the first time in U.S. history what happens inside a U.S. meat plant gas chamber, CO2 facility, the gas chambers. And what emerged was so horrifying, in fact, that we did a story on a philanthropist who was so upset he hired a truck to show the footage and drive through Los Angeles, because you can't really watch more than 10 seconds. Even my companion animals got upset hearing the screaming as I was editing the video. It's horrifying, and to say it's painless. And of course, I invite Smithfield on anytime. We'd love to dialogue. They say it's within the law, within USDA regulations, but you have to see it for yourself. There's been quite a few editorials, for example, in the New York Times and in other periodicals, basically saying the horror of it. So yes, you would think, Leah, that would be enough. Let me ask you, before we go to another caller, when you're dealing with Washington, the lobbyists for the meat and dairy industry and the pharmaceutical industry, who are so intertwined, because guess what? If people ate a healthy plant-based diet, they wouldn't need all those a lot of the pills that are making billions of dollars, the cholesterol lowering pills, etc. So is there a sense of change? This Farm Bill only comes up every 5 years. It's going to be reauthorized, hopefully with the changes that you're advocating. But are the members of Congress starting to get it, that this industry is destroying our planet, polluting our waters, creating, as you say, terrible conditions in communities of color and torturing animals. Are they getting it?
So I was there, 2 weeks ago, and we were there as part of a Farm Action Coalition meeting. And we ended up, so it's made up of all kinds of people, from faith, from academia, from animal rights to food justice. And we all were coming together around the Farm Bill under this term, or this campaign rally cry, which is food, not feed, where we're trying to get the government to support us eating healthy, being healthy, and not towards farmed animals, and then supporting, therefore, factory farming. And we were in and out. We had about 90 meetings over 3 days between all of the coalition members. And my sentiment, my takeaway is that we have a chance this time to make a difference. We have Cory Booker, who's sort of, in a way, leading us, but we also have senators from the Republican side we met with, and congressmen and women who we met with on both sides, who are beginning to hear us and say, okay, there are pieces of this that are really not okay, that are unacceptable, that have come to a point where we need to begin to hold this industry accountable. And particularly around the kind of corporate monopoly, the corporate consolidation of power that is leading to suffering and injury and sickness all around our country.
Yes, and let's hope they don't react to that by, for example, giving $1 billion to create more local slaughterhouses, which is what the Biden administration did. I mean, that's not the answer. The answer is to help the farmers transition to plant-based.
Yes.
We just published an article about fungi, which is mushrooms essentially being used to create meat, and they can ferment it into massive, giant vats that can produce a lot of meat. There's actually a mega fungi ranch opening, quote unquote ranch, in Colorado. There's a lot of exciting developments. You'd think that the government would want to get in on that, and I hope they do. There's always hope. All right, we've got a couple more callers. On the other side of the break, we'll not take any more callers. What we will do is dive into TransFARMation. I can't help it that you're popular, Leah, and that everybody's calling in.
I'm so grateful for the questions. It's really interactive. It's great.
Yes. Lindsay from Los Angeles, your question or thought for Leah Garcés of Mercy for Animals.
Thank you for taking my call. You guys already covered what I was going to go into. I did, as I was listening, I went through the steps, went to Mercy for Animals site, found my Congress, clicked on it, and they sent the letter to Dianne Feinstein, et cetera, which Jane already talked about. But my one point I guess I can make is how important it is that we are backing the farmers, and we are thinking of, in a way of practicality and not just emotionally of what we want to change, but ways to do it through helping and supporting the farmers, through getting our government to do that, but also for us to go out there as individuals and get involved. If you can't come out of your house, I've been in my house for weeks, but what I'm doing is I'm online constantly, and I can still be very effective. So there's a lot of activists that are older, and I think we just need to have resources that make it easy for them to take action. And I just want to plead with everyone to support this. It's so easy to do so. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that was just a comment, so we'll go on to our next call, but it was an excellent comment. Thank you, Lindsay. And she is one of the hardest working people, one of our volunteers at Unchained TV, who has her own show. Okay. Annie, quick question from Sherman Oaks for Leah Garcés, CEO and President of Mercy for Animals.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me. I'll try and make it as quick as possible. I'm so grateful. Jane, love you, Leah. What you do with Mercy for Animals, incredible, especially that video that you have of close-up of the chicken when one of the chickens taken from the cage, how that chicken goes into hyperventilation, shows the emotions that the animals go through, including the chicken that is hard to see. But you do so much incredible work, and I totally support you and recommend everybody. One of the things, I have many questions, but one of the questions I would ask is that there are so many departments like USDA, we have Fish and Game. These departments are taking so much money, and their motivation is to keep the bleeding of the animals, because that's the business they're in. What can we do to convert them, transition them as well? Because they, from the back door, they're constantly supporting to keep the slaughterhouses, to keep animal hunting, to keep murdering animals.
Yes, good points.
So,
thank you, Annie. Let's give Leah a chance to answer that one.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in people power. At the end of the day, these members of Congress, the folks that are sitting there in Washington, are representing us. And although they can get away with a lot, they can't get away with completely ignoring their constituents. So I think, for example, signing the petition that Jane has been so kind to share is really important. Hearing from you all directly from their constituents makes a big, big difference. So, I think that takes a collective force. It takes each and every person really focused on their representative and just going at it, persisting consistently over time, showing up and having this singular message that this is unacceptable. And that's a really important quality that we need to keep building as a country, putting pressure on our members of Congress to represent the constituents and not kind of fall prey to the powers that be at these big monopoly companies that are lining the pockets, literally pouring billions into Washington. But I really believe that despite the fact that there's, always been this situation where billions are poured into Washington to keep the status quo, we have something they don't have, which is passion and persistence and perseverance. And we just have to keep showing up over time, marching forward all the time.
All right, we have our last caller of the day. Then we're going to cut off calls. Jose in Dallas, Texas, your question or thought for Leah Garcés.
Hi, thank you so much. I just had a quick question, maybe a more personal question. What has been like the greatest challenge you faced as the CEO of like such a well-known, animal rights organization?
Oh, that's a great question. I think probably the greatest challenge that I face as a CEO is just the amazing amount of work that we're doing, and I want to always be involved with all of it. And I have to really take a step back. I have amazing people who are at the helm of each of these programs and try to delegate, trust, and let them do the work. And stepping back is a hard part of being a CEO, honestly, is saying, I have wonderful people in place. Mercy for Animals is just full of the most intelligent, passionate, and persistent folks. And just sort of letting go a little bit, actually. As someone who used to be the campaigner on the ground, stepping back a little bit and just doing big picture stuff more.
So we're going to dive in now. Such great callers. No more callers for the hour because I really want to get into the Farm Transformation Project on the other side of the break. What's really fascinating about this is that, well, in the words of Dr. Silas Rao, who I admire, we're all being factory farmed. And, his sense is that the farmers are being factory farmed. They are trapped in this situation. And as you mentioned, so many of them are really, really desperate to get out, and they want a way out. And you have given them that with this Farm Transformation Program, or the TransFARMation Program. Can you just give us an overview? How did this get started? And then on the other side, we'll talk about your four highlight success stories.
Sure. Well, it really started back in 2014 was the first time I actually sat down and talked to a chicken factory farmer, and his name is Craig Watts, and he's one of our transformation farmers now. And he and I, weren't meant to meet. We were a vegan animal rights activist and a chicken factory farmer. But through a common connection, a journalist, I went to visit him, and I found myself really understanding the system from a new perspective. And over months, he allowed me to film inside of his houses that were with chickens. And then together we came out and exposed the industry for being a harm to the animals and a harm to the farmer. And it came out with Nicholas Kristof in the New York Times in 2014. From there, we started to come up with this idea of how can we help farmers who are trapped in debt and want to get out? How can we practically help them reuse these facilities that they've invested so much their life into, their land, their property, their homes, and they would go bankrupt and lose everything if they stopped chicken farming. In 2016, he stopped chicken farming. 2018, we came up with the idea of TransFARMation, including the name. And I brought it to Mercy for Animals when I started in 2018 at Mercy for Animals. And we began to think of a program. We got enough funding to hire some team members. And then we started the project in earnest, which we have wonderful Tyler Whitley, who is leading director of transformation, and really thinking of the nuts and bolts. Because I'm not a farmer. I am not an architect, but Tyler knows how to find those people, and he has that experience. So really thinking of the consultants we'd need, the kind of blueprints we'd need, the programs, the training, and really building those resources for farmers to be able to transition. And now we're in earnest. The program is in full, in fully operational. When we first launched it, we had over 200 farmers write us right away, no advertising, who want out right away. So there is a huge demand for this work. We just hope we can meet it.
All right, we're going to take a very short break on Voice America Radio, but we're going to stay live on Facebook, on the Unchained TV app, on Twitter. We're all over social media, and we'll be back in a minute. Thank you. So let me take this opportunity to tell everybody about Unchained TV, which is our nonprofit's global streaming network. We started this because so many incredible documentaries and various other projects like cooking shows aim to get on the major streaming networks like a Netflix or Amazon Prime, and they don't quite often, most often, I would say. And so they're making great content that not enough people are seeing. And we really want to get around the mainstream blackout on this kind of content, especially against advertiser-based media. If you look at meat, dairy, and pharmaceutical advertisers, they're not going to put this content out in the way that they should or at all. So we started a streaming network, which you can download for free on your phone, totally 100% free via our nonprofit. And you can download it on your Apple TV device, your Amazon Fire Stick, or your Roku device to watch it on your TV set. And you can also watch it online. Just go to unchainedtv.com and click Watch Now. And we have more than 1,000 videos at this point, including award-winning documentaries. We actually just launched Land of Ahimsa today, which is an incredible look at the unfortunate situation of dairy cows in India. There's a lot of, and what you can do about it. Yes, there's a lot of fascinating content up there. We also covered the Mercy for Animals Gala at the Skirball Center here in Los Angeles, which was an amazing event. Wow, what a star-studded event that was, Leah.
Yeah, that was so fun. Thanks for being there, Jane. It was a blast. We had James Cromwell there as our kind of star honoree, and it was just fabulous. It was such a lovely evening.
Yeah, and it just showed me how well organized Mercy for Animals is, because I can tell you, pulling off a gala like that at one of the major venues in Los Angeles, the Skirball Center, is no easy feat. And yet it was absolutely flawless. And so many people I admire, like Chef Babette Davis was honored, and James Cromwell was honored, and there was a red carpet. It was really a great event. So when we come back, we're going to dive deep into this farm transformation project because it's so important. Again, it's not so much bad people, okay? It's a bad system. And these poultry farmers, a lot of them want out. They do. They want to do the right thing. So Mercy for Animals is really helping them transform. All right, we're going to take 1 second, and then we're coming back. Stay right there. Welcome back to Unchained TV on Voice America Radio. I'm Jane Velez Mitchell, and you are now re-entering a portal to a transformative way of living. We are so excited to be talking to Leah Garcés, CEO and president of Mercy for Animals, one of the biggest animal rights, animal welfare, animal protection organizations in the world. And Leah, you have this project that is a game changer called the TransFARMation Project, the TransFARMation Project.
Yep.
And tell us really about these success stories, because we've sort of given the overview of what this is. And now we really want to get into the weeds. How is it changing farming in America? And I know we've got a little screen grab here of 4 successful stories. Can you give us some details?
Yeah, I'll start with Craig Watts, who's that second picture there, who I mentioned is the person who really gave the idea kind of its energy. And I was there 3 weeks ago now in his farm in Fairmont, North Carolina. And that is the site where I used to where I filmed chickens in his houses that end up in the New York Times exposing the cruelties of factory farming with him less kind of arm in arm, showing the difficulties of factory farming, not just for the chickens, but for the farmers too. And fast forward to last week, he just had his first bloom of shiitake mushrooms. And it was just such a moment of hope for me he basically put a container inside of his old factory farms, inside of these warehouses. And then it's got, it's a controlled environment in there, and he's got racks of mushrooms now. And what's fascinating is he's using all the old pieces of the factory farm. So the shelves are the kind of dividers that used to divide up the chickens, and he's making them into shelves. And now they have shiitake mushrooms. And what a moment, really, to witness his full transition away from factory farming towards shiitake mushrooms and this kind of freedom that he has. And it's not just freedom of financially, but it's also the freedom kind of his mental health, of his health. And we also did something really fun where we took his mortgage. So it took him 30 years to pay off the mortgage that he took out when he was 22 years old to get all of the money to raise chickens and to have those facilities. And he finally paid it off, even though he paid it off in December. Even though he stopped chicken factory farming in 2016, he still had that debt. He still had to work. He had to do little side jobs, pay it off. And we had a mortgage burning ceremony. And we actually lit the mortgage on fire and celebrated his final freedom through this mushroom activity and through his breaking away from factory farming. And that is really, really, it's literally his freedom, but it's symbolic of the freedom that all farmers deserve, to not be indentured service, to not be in this debt, to not be under the thumb of, a corporate entity that is only concerned about the bottom line and not about the welfare of the animals or of the farmer. And that's just one story. Shall I go on?
Oh, wow. Well, it's so impressive. Now, what I've heard is that in these communities, and I've talked to sanctuaries around the South, the West, and a lot of them are saying that ranchers are sending their animals to slaughter because it's becoming more and more unmanageable, this industry, with the extreme cold in the winter, with the extreme heat in the summertime. There was a video, for example, in Kansas that was on TikTok. I won't play it because it's just too disturbing. Somebody just got a camera while they were driving, and there were hundreds of dead cows with their legs up in the air. They had died from the extreme heat and also possibly drought because the water is getting scarcer due to climate change. And then, of course, in the wintertime, there's this extreme cold, and you actually have a program to try to improve the conditions for these poor animals who are driven in bitter cold in open air trucks to slaughter. But it's becoming unmanageable because of climate change.
Right.
So is that going to accelerate this process of farmers transitioning from animals to plant-based?
I do think so. I think it's really important. And what's fascinating about the whole mushroom approach is this is in a container inside a factory farm, like an old factory farm. The apocalypse could be going on outside and those mushrooms would be fine. And so this is real sustainable food. This is food that will sustain us forever. It's food security. And it's also very healthy. It requires low resources. It doesn't require a lot of water or land, things that are all diminishing in our world, sadly. So whereas factory farming is doing the opposite, a third of our arable land is being used to raise food for farmed animals instead of ourselves. We have the Amazon burning down to feed cattle. I mean, we are in a very serious crisis, and we have to take that seriously. And I think that is going to accelerate at least the politicians listening. And I think also for farmers, it's just an easier option than trying to keep animals alive and well in a circumstance like what we're going through in terms of climate change.
Do you think politicians are aware of what the farmers are going through in terms of the rising cost of feed, the growing difficulty of keeping these animals alive and I can't say thriving because a lot of them are sick, but at least alive given the extreme temperatures? Are members of Congress aware of this?
I don't think so. And that's part of our job is that's why we were there. And so many of them weren't even aware of the very basics of how the contract farming system works. And we would have to tell that story, and they'd be quite upset about it, and they would try to learn about it. Very few were aware. So part of our job is just getting the word out. And that's, what TransFARMation is also about, is that changing the narrative. There's this really big misconception in the United States that farmers are happy, that our animals are treated well, that this is an essential way of producing food, and we're feeding the world. Well, we're trying to change that narrative through this project to say, well, if you think that, you should just ask a farmer, and a farmer will tell you this is a horrible system that oppresses everyone, from the animals to the communities to the farmers themselves. And it actually pits people against each other too. It pits a farmer against the community. It pits activists against the farmers. It pits us all against each other. And my good friend Craig Watts, he said that it's like we're all in a jar, and there's red ants and black ants, and someone's shaking the jar, and then we start fighting. But we never stop to question who is shaking the jar. We have to stop and say, this is an oppressive system. That oppressive system of factory farming is the jar shaker that we have to deconstruct. We need a new jar. We need a new system.
And, when it comes to the government, because really the Farm Bill, which you are absolutely vigorously trying to make more fair, and we urge everybody, if you do one thing, we've already gotten several people who've said that, yes, they're signing, going to mercyforanimals.org and signing what you want them to sign, which is just go to mercyforanimals.org and you just click a couple of clicks, and you're going to send a letter to 2 U.S. senators and your member of Congress. And it's that easy. Just go to mercyforanimals.org and then comment when you've done it. Let us know you've done it. But the point is that we're running out of time. We are barreling toward extinction. There's a group called Racing Extinction. And the climate change issue vis-a-vis animal agriculture is also being ignored. So you have institutions in government. The head of the USDA is a dairy industry trade group leader. Mm-hmm. You've got so much power consolidated in these industries that then have co-opted branches of government, agencies of government. Is there a way to break through? Do you think that we can change the Farm Bill? Because it's happening this year. And if there's 5 more years of subsidies to animal agriculture, that's what's keeping it going. If you took out the subsidies, if you took out those unfair insurance reparations to farmers when they've lost their animals in a flood or a tornado, that would really collapse animal agriculture. So essentially, the U.S. government is keeping animal agriculture going.
I mean, that's absolutely right. Like I said, 30% of all of our ag subsidies are going strictly to the feed that is sustaining factory farming. So the feed that goes to factory farmed animals. Well, only 4% of our subsidies are going to vegetables and fruit. And yet, 90% of Americans are not eating the recommended daily amount of fruits and vegetables. So there's a real impact on our health, on our well-being through these subsidies. And so our request to government is to change it, to flip it. And without those subsidies, I'm very certain that this industry would collapse. And with transition money, farmers would definitely escape the system as fast as possible. I think of it like tobacco. And there was actually subsidies that were supporting tobacco for a long time, and then it would become very unfavorable with the public to support tobacco. The government pulled the plug on the support for tobacco, and overnight that industry fell and farmers exited in mass. And that's what we need to do with factory farming, very similar to the tobacco industry and the transition that farmers experience, especially in the South, moving away from tobacco towards another product. Now we need to do the same thing with our meat, dairy, and egg industry.
So how is the reaction on Capitol Hill to the Industrial Agriculture Accountability Act, IAAA?
Well, I think they can't ignore us. And I believe that we had 90 meetings as we walked in and out of congressmen and women's offices and met with their staffers. We met with senators and their staffers. And I don't think they can ignore us. I think that we're too big of a coalition coming from too many different stakeholders, like I said, from faith, academia, from animal rights to environment to food justice. You can't ignore that. And it's a very powerful meeting of different constituents, different stakeholders, but all coming together to say one thing: industrial animal agriculture is bad for us, and the government needs to stop supporting it and stop right now. And we may have to go many farm bills. This won't be the last time that we have to go to lobby on the farm bill and try to change it. But I can tell you, if we don't try, nothing will happen. And so we have to keep persevering. We have to keep going, marching forward, and making changes and holding the government and industry accountable.
Now, what about Kamala Harris, the vice president? Because she obviously knows Cory Booker. Cory Booker, a vegan, speaking, he's speaking truth to power in this situation because he's there in the Senate and able to talk to his colleagues and get the word out. I've also gotten the sense that Kamala Harris might be very amenable to these concepts. She was in Las Vegas and she reportedly said she was trying to go vegan before 6 when she visited a vegan restaurant for lunch. Any contact with her?
No, not at all, but I'm hopeful always. And I think Cory Booker is such a fantastic ally for this work. And I'm so grateful he's on the Ag Committee. And I know that that's not something he was involved with before. And he's recognized how important it is that he's on the Ag Committee. And he's from New Jersey, so you'd probably think, why does somebody from New Jersey going to be on the Ag Committee? It should be ag states. But agriculture is food and everybody eats. So it's important that he's there. It's important everyone's there showing up. It's really, and that is the committee that really is going to be controlling the draft of the Farm Bill. So it's critical he and other allies are there.
Yes. And so Paige is asking, this is so important. And how do we support? We can support by doing one thing. It's super, super easy. You simply, and I'll just show you because I did this right before we started the show. I went on to Mercy for Animals, okay? And there's a little button that says, reach out to your Congress members. And I did one click, and there it is, the Industrial Agriculture Accountability Act, Senator Dianne Feinstein, my Congressman Ted Lieu, and Senator Alex Padilla. And, I've actually met Ted Lieu at an animal rights conference, and he spoke about his love for animals. He might be very, very amenable to this entire concept. I think he would be one of the people to reach out to. So where is it now? We've got about 10 minutes left in this fabulous conversation. Where, aside from doing that, and everybody, please do that. And once you've done that, comment, and we'll be happy to report that you've done it. Where does it go from here? Because I think the Farm Bill in October, I believe, is going to be decided. So that's not a lot of time.
It's not a lot of time, and a lot of the congressmen and women will be beginning to formulate their opinions and their positions around the end of March. So this is a critical time to be influencing them and making sure their constituents are hearing from you about what they what you feel is important as they represent you. So, please do sign that petition, write to them, and persist, follow up and ask them, well, what is your position? Are you going to be supporting the IAA? Are you going to be supporting farmed animals and a fair, just food system? And make sure to follow up with that. I also urge you to volunteer with Mercy for Animals and become part of our volunteer program, where we're trying to really build people power, kind of position ourselves and position this issue as something that cannot be ignored. So when we walk in the room, we have this huge group of people who are with us in the room virtually, virtually speaking, and are really showing that this is not an issue that's going to go away. We're not going to give up. We're going to persist, and we have passion.
And when you volunteer, what exactly would you be doing?
There's a lot of different things. Whatever you would like to do, you could do. We have everything from writing letters to educating folks, to handing out leaflets, to being part of training sessions. We have a actually very sophisticated program where you get training if you wish, and also you get to meet other folks and have a community of people who care about this, either in your own town or across the country. So it's a great way to get involved.
Yes. And, we're getting so much positive. Sign, says Jeff Hoffman.
Hey, thank you, Jeff.
Doing this important work. And somebody else said, where's the link? Okay, mercyforanimals.org is the link. You literally go to mercyforanimals.org, and it's right there on the homepage, it's so easy. So I just want to applaud you for doing all of this, because this is the work that's going to make the difference. My personal belief is that if we change that farm bill, literally, without the subsidies, Tom says, is it that simple? Yes, it's that simple, Tom. Mercyforanimals.org, and just click. And it's real easy. Real easy, dude. And then get back to us. But I mean, if we ended these subsidies, the average fast food burger would cost, $15, $20 without the government subsidies. People can debate the exact number, but it would be a lot more expensive. So when even environmentalists like John Doerr, I was listening to his book, and he's like, well, people are going to eat what they want to eat. No, that's a cop-out. People are going to eat what's inexpensive. And if it weren't for the government subsidizing all this, it would be much cheaper to eat fruits, vegetables, nuts, and grains. And so that's one of the switches. One last question. With this whole avian flu that's happening, now you see the news reports, all they talk about is, oh my gosh, the rising price of eggs. Never talking about how, well, we shouldn't really be eating eggs. They're cholesterol bombs just for our health. And all the male chicks are macerated, ground up alive. So that's a really, really cruel system. There is a lot of cruelty in eggs. The media is a big part of the problem. One of the reasons we started Unchained TV, our global streaming network, because they just don't cover the animal aspect. I mean, tens of millions of birds have been killed in a horrifically brutal fashion, ventilation shutdown because of the avian flu, and the news media only talks about, oh, the price of eggs is going up.
Yeah. And the worst part of that, maybe not the worst part, but one really horrible part of that is our tax dollars will pay for that. That mass killing on farm, we will pay the farmers and the industry for that. So they don't have any penalty for doing that. They don't care. It's an easy, decision for them. Of course, it's horrific for the animals, and it's mentally difficult for the farmers too, to have to go through that. And you're right. There's such, I think that it's a matter of when, not if, that a much more serious avian flu comes to fruition. And we just went through a global pandemic. Do we really want to suffer that again? If you look at experts, avian flu it's already jumped away from just bird to bird, and it's going bird to mammal now. We've heard of it in bears, for example. It's a very small step from going away to hitting us. And that should be concern enough, that we shouldn't be keeping animals in this explosive circumstance where disease can spread so quickly, so rapidly. That should be enough of a concern to revisit how we're keeping animals. And it's horrific. And what I did an interview last week about this, and and this was more from a business perspective for companies, and they're saying, well, how should we change our business approach? And advice was you should be thinking about replacing your eggs with plant-based eggs. That right now, Just Egg is cheaper than some of the eggs that you see out there on the shelf, the plant-based egg, the liquid egg. And that's how you contain volatility. That's how you'll ensure you're not suffering from the volatility that factory farming brings in terms of availability and price. Plants don't get the flu, and you won't suffer that kind of volatility that companies. So, that's my message to companies is think about wherever you can right away, switching out all of those baked goods with plant-based eggs and everything you possibly can that doesn't, right away appear as an egg. Get rid of it right away. You have a product, you can have a more stable product in your muffins, your cookies, your pancakes, and at the same time, you're doing a great thing for animals and the planet.
Well, I just want to thank you for all you do for animals and the planet, and we so need your organization to lead the way. I feel better just sleeping at night knowing that you're on Capitol Hill fighting. Sometimes it seems to me like we're, in the 21st century, and a lot of these folks who should be on top of all this are back in the 1950s. Like, oh, well, what would you do if the price? Yeah, there's something called Just Egg. Do you look at social media
or the grocery store shelf? Like it's right there.
Yeah, it's right there. And so I just hope we can catch up the members of Congress to the 21st century. And I think if anybody can do it, you and Mercy for Animals can do it. Thank you, Leah Garcés, so much for joining us.
Thank you, Jane.
We love you.
Well, we love you too, Jane.
So many people are saying they're signing, and come back soon. And hopefully we can celebrate in October.
Yes. All right, Jane. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone listening.